Hi everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be solving the reverse in place challenge here. So in this challenge, we want to take an array. So I can say const list is going to be an array of numbers, something like this, 1, 2, 3. We want to take a list like this, and then we want to turn it into a reversed list like this, 3, 2, 1. So we want to go through and we want to just reverse all of the elements in the list. And in particular, we want to do this in place, and we want to do this without calling the .reverse method. So let's create a new function here called reverse in place, and this can be a generic function which we will pass a type into, and this is going to take a list of that generic type and it's going to return a list of the same type. And for now, we can just return that given list that we have passed in. And so if I did something like const result equals reverse in place, and so we can call our function and I can pass in the list I've created right here, and then we can do console.log results equals result. So if I do that, we will see that I get result equals 1, 2, 3, which is what we would expect. And so what we want to do is we want to actually reverse all of the elements in this list here, and we want to do that without calling the built-in reverse method. So this reverse method exists on an array, and you can see it says reverses the elements in an array in place. This method mutates the array and returns a reference to the same array. So if I run this now, you can see that I get 3, 2, 1. So this does do what we want, but this is the built-in method which accomplishes this. And what we want to do in this this challenge is we want to implement this method directly ourselves. And so there's one more point here, which is that this is really giving us a hint into this kind of subtle point, which is that this method is mutating the actual array and returning a reference to the same array. So this is a pretty tricky point when you're first learning JavaScript or TypeScript, which I want to touch on here a little bit more. And so what's happening is that this variable here called list is pointing to this actual array, and they're not the same thing. The actual array is the actual list of elements, which is stored in memory somewhere, and then this list variable is just pointing to that list in memory somewhere. So if I just comment this out for now, and also this down here, and even this, let's just look at this one list for now. If I say const other list is going to be equal to list, this is essentially saying make this other variable also point to this same list. So then if I do console.log, and I can just do a 1 like that, and let's pass in list and other list like that, we'll see that we get, and let's put a 2 here, we'll get 1 and 2, and then we have 1, 2, 3 as the list in both cases. And now if I do console.log 3, and then I say list triple equals other list, we will see that that is true, which means that these are both pointing to the same array of data. It doesn't mean that the actual data is necessarily the same. It's asking you if these are the same reference. And so if over here I did something like list at position 2 equals 50, so I'm going to just mutate the list, we'll see that now we have 50 for both of these variables here, and we're still pointing to the same list. Now, if I did something else like other list equals 1, 2, 3, and I remove this mutate statement, so now what you can see is the arrays are equivalent, but I get false when I have list triple equals other list. So now, even though these have the same data inside them, they are separate arrays which are stored separately in memory. And so list is not pointing to the same array in memory as other list is, even though the data is the same. So this is really demonstrating this point that the variable declaration for an array or an object in TypeScript is separate from the actual data that it stores in memory. So if you had an array or an object and you wanted to perform some kind of equality on them, you would need to know if you're trying to ask yourself if these references are pointing to the same data, or if they are pointing to different pieces of data in memory, and I'm trying to see if the data is actually equal. If I want to do a deep equality check on the data to see if the data is actually equivalent. So hopefully that makes sense and clarifies the context of this challenge a little bit more. This is definitely a tricky topic which can trip people up when they're first working with arrays and objects in TypeScript and JavaScript. So let's remove this code and bring back the original code that we had, like this. And again, what we want to do is we want to reverse this original list and we want to just modify it in place. We don't want to return a new list, which we could easily do by calling .slice.reverse. But now this is going to be returning a new list, which is not equivalent to the original list. And just to see that, we can say console.log is the returned list the same reference? And we can say result triple equals list. And as we see here, that's going to be false because right now we're calling .slice, which is going to be copying this original list and then reversing it. So we want to implement this ourselves. And so what we can do is we can have a for loop which iterates through our original list. And what we want to do is we only need to iterate up to the halfway point in our list. And so the idea is that we would essentially start at the first element and then find the element of the opposite index from the back of the list or the end of the list moving towards the front. And then we would want to swap those two elements. So we would swap those two elements in place and we would keep doing that until we reach the middle point of the list. And so what we can do is we can say for let I equal 0. So we'll start at the first index, and as long as I is less than the list.length divided by 2, we want to increment I. So this is going to let us iterate up to the middle point of the list. And let's go ahead and just return the list down here. So once we are done with this iteration and swapping the elements, we will just return a reference to the same list that was passed in. And then what we can do is we can say const element is going to be equal to list at position I. So we'll just get the element that is at the current position that we're at. And then we want to find the index of the opposite element from the other side of the array. So we can say const opposite index is equal to list.length minus I. And then we also want to minus 1. So you think about this very simple list of 3 elements here. At the first iteration, we will have I equals 0, and the opposite index would be 2. And we can get 2 by taking the length of this array, which is 3, subtracting I, which would give us 3 again, because here I is 0. And so then we need to subtract 1 more from that result to get 2, which is going to give us the opposite element here. So that's going to give us the opposite index, and then we can say opposite element is going to be equal to list at that index. And then we want to swap the elements. So we can say list at the current index is equal to opposite index, and list at the opposite index. Oops, this is going to be opposite element here. And then the opposite index needs to be equal to the current element. So this will swap the 2 elements in place. And now if we run this code, you will see that this passes the tests, and we have, is the returned list the same reference? And that is going to be true now. So that shows you that when we pass in this list right here, I can delete these. So as we pass in this list here, and then we compare that to the result that we get back, we get the result true, which means that these are pointing to the same data. But as you can see, the result is 3, 2, 1 rather than 1, 2, 3. So this is how we can reverse these elements in place in order to solve this challenge. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to get more content like this in the future. This is one of the challenges in the TypeScript module of the Pairwise curriculum. And as you can see, we have a ton of other challenges like this. If you thought this was interesting and you want to try some of these challenges on your own, head over to Pairwise where you can get started today. And we have an entire curriculum here which teaches you all the skills to become a full stack web developer. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the video. We will see you in the next one.